today, what I want to talk to you about are smart techniques with technology. And what I mean by this is just simple things you can do. One of the things that we have in Romania that is extremely powerful is we have some of the best and most talented programmers in the world, which is why Romanians are a joke, but it's true everywhere. We have all this talent, right? This is a mass amount, at least 200,000 developers in the world that we can credit to coming from Romania. And I know that some of you here are very entrepreneurial. So today, I'm going to introduce myself and talk to you about some tips that I think are great. I see code, I see projects, I see pitches. But as an entrepreneur, somewhat of an investor, and a CTO, I have some ideas. So allow me to introduce myself. This is Bookster. Currently, I'm the CTO of Bookster, which is now a several-year-old startup. We have 1.6 million users and growing. We're growing at 30% every month. What Bookster does is we're a platform for discovering books and reading. And this is important because as we have the internet, there's more and more content to reach. But I'll talk more about that soon. So why should you listen to me? Besides being honorary Romanian and having the energy to talk and being from Silicon Valley, I actually do have a lot of technical software experience in my background. I've helped design over 43 mobile apps, launched 6 startups, and I've probably invested in over a dozen. But besides that, in terms of technical expertise, I have an understanding of deep learning, API, CRMs, and the perfect role at Bookster, which is we're combining all of these things together. Bookster is huge. We're a huge platform and growing. You can read this really quickly, but what's special about Bookster when we talk about education in the US is that we have millions and millions of users and growing. Now, you might say that books are outdated or people aren't interested or they're not buying them, and that's not the case. In fact, if you look at the internet, we have more and more text and content than ever, but how do you find it? If you're Googling, it's taking you a very long time to find those things that you need. Even with developers, when we have an issue, we search Reddit, we search Stack Flow, we search all these things. There's so much code to pull from, you don't know the right thing. Bookster solves this for now on a non-technical level, but this is all going to bring in light a bigger picture. One of the things I hear is, I want to be the Uber for puppies, flowers, underwear, food, the Uber for Uber. Now, I have something to say about this because I'm from Silicon Valley. I'm friends with the founders, and I can honestly say, because we looked it up, I'm one of the first 300 users of Uber ever in the world. In case you're not familiar, that's pretty small. I'm basically their private beta. But what I want to speak to you about this point with Uber is that Uber didn't start off wanting to be Uber. They had great founders, but the goal wasn't to change transportation around the world. The goal with Uber was super simple. Getting a taxi in San Francisco was impossible. Uber wanted to fix this. Now, as it grew and it became a great technology, people used it, and it becomes the Uber that we know today, 6 years later. That's not the beginning of Uber. So when I hear a startup say, I have 2 friends and we're in a garage and we're coding all night and we're going to be the next Uber, I say, you've got it wrong. Go out the door, start selling, and talk to your users. Because that's what Uber did right in the beginning. It wasn't code. It was getting the business right. So this is my number 1 rule. Having a good idea is much better than having good code. And why I say this is there's lots of talent out there. We have lots of code, right? Repositories, open source technologies that we can use. But if the idea isn't good enough, it doesn't matter how beautiful your code is. It doesn't matter how complicated it are, geolocating, tagging, syncing, integrates with Salesforce. It does not matter. You really must have a solid and beautiful idea. Going back to Uber, what was their idea? Getting a taxi in San Francisco was hard, and they wanted to solve that. So my first rule, my only rule, generally, is to make sure you have a good idea first. All right, so let's say you have a good idea, and it sounds like we have a couple developers here, we have some entrepreneurs here. Validate the idea. Okay, so now you think it's a good idea. That's great. You're also the founder, so you're going to think your idea is good no matter what. But before you start coding, really think about, are there ways to validate this idea? Can you create a sign-up page, a landing page? Can you figure out how many users you have? Are there people that want to use your product? Validate the product idea. Don't build it and then try to get the users, but can you have users before you even build the product? Some tips and tricks I have related to that. Pencil and paper. Anyone know how to find that? Maybe. Figure out what platform you need to be on, whether it's Salesforce or Magento or Twitter or whatever that is, but flesh it out. I've often found I've gotten quotes for mobile apps that were like $200,000 to build, and they're convinced it's the biggest thing that everyone's going to use. But if the users don't want it, it's not going to matter. So you'd be surprised with napkin sketches, pencil and paper, you show your potential user and they will say, I don't get it. Where's the button? Where is this? What do I want? Congratulations, you just saved yourself $100,000 and 14 weeks of coding. So it's old school, but I suggest that you flesh and really understand the product first and foremost. Then it goes on to execution, right? Okay, you have the users. Have a good idea. Okay, this is good. Now you can build. Now this becomes a game of execution. You know who's going to use it. You know what it should look like. Now you can code, right? We've already saved 6 months of time on making a prototype. Now is the time to execute. So when you're executing, and what I mean by that, and I don't know how many here have a project management background, but really make a timeline. And I know this is counterintuitive, right? You have no app, you have no code done, but make the timeline. How much time are you willing to give and invest in this? 14 weeks, 16 weeks, 22 weeks? Map it out, make a timeline. If you don't have a timeline, find one online, download it. You look at the timeline and you start to figure out, how is this successful? We want 100 users by this date. We want 200 users by this date. Once you start lining that up, okay, good idea, good users, project plan and timeline, then we can move on. Now, what do I want to say by this? So, I don't know how many here work with American companies, but I want to say something really special that Americans usually don't say, which is, I think the startup community, even in the US, needs to be more European. And what I mean by this is Europe is a very special place. If you look at apps like Skype and WhatsApp and Spotify, they were all European. Europe is, I think, the most special place to ever launch an app. You have people who are multilingual, traveling across countries, going between borders. If you really wanted to make something viral, you could do it in Europe better and faster. What I would like to encourage is not to try to solve problems that you think Silicon Valley has. We have enough rich and well-funded kids in Silicon Valley helping them save the Silicon Valley world. They're fine. No one's starving. I would like to see more European problems, because what I mean by that is if you have a European problem, it means it's an actual problem. It means it's a problem that people can attack and do things on. If it's really good, it'll catch on and spread globally. If not, you can evaluate. But the number one thing that I hate to see is when people want to copycat Silicon Valley. You look at companies and they say, oh, it was really good in America, so I built it for Romania. It's not going to work because the Romanian mindset and the American mindset are totally different. So don't copycat and try to actually solve problems that are meaningful to Europe. If it's great, it's going to translate across the world. My other point is to do what you love. Now, I know this is cliche. Does anyone here know about WeWork? Heard of WeWork? Is WeWork here yet? Okay, a couple. WeWork is, I don't even know, a $7 billion, $60 billion company, I forget, of co-working spaces. And they always argue, do what you love. Okay, that's great. But what I mean by do what you love is you need the energy, okay? So you found the users, you found the product, you have a timeline, you know it's successful. Okay, this is good. Are you gonna make it? What most people don't realize is to be a successful company, to be an Uber, to be anything, takes 4 to 6 years. I'm not a founder of Bookster, but Bookster is on its 5th or 6th year now. There is so many years of fleshing out the product and the platform and making sure that growth was organic in there before I even joined and could help scale. And if I had joined Bookster even 3 years ago, I probably wouldn't have been helpful because there wasn't that repeating business model. There wasn't all those people. There wasn't my fire to add to make it grow. So you have to be able to make it 4 to 6 years. So if you wireframe it and you do it, if you're not into it, if you don't like it, if you're vegetarian and you're trying to sell a meat app, you probably shouldn't do it because it's going to require blood, sweat, tears, really getting to that bottom line. And years go by quick. I mean, that's the other thing. This is a young crowd. Are you willing to sign off your 20s? Are you willing to give up a huge chunk of your life for this idea? And the answer is, if you love what you're doing, even if you're not a founder, you'll do it. And so you need that energy too. This is my other point. We say this all the time. Boring makes money. And I know maybe this concept is foreign for entrepreneurs. We'll monetize later. We'll add ads. We'll add a subscription. I've heard it all. But the importance of money isn't about money. It's not about the revenue. You could be making $5 a month. You could be doing a sign up for 30 cents. Money is one of the most exchangeable, fundable ways to know if people like your idea, even if it is 25 cents, one lei, whatever it is. It's an exchange. It's validation that someone is willing to pay for that product, even if it's $0, but they're clicking, yes, I confirm, but it's $0. This is absolutely crucial because what you're doing is you're really honing in on what it is that you want to do. When I go back to other things that we're working on, I think about how can we, do this? How can we do this on a larger scale? If we look at all the platforms that we're working on here, all of these make money. But we couldn't have started on this platform that has 9 different products in the very beginning because our resources had to be focused. We had to understand, do people want quizzes? Do people want content? What is it that people want? And will they pay for it? And you can't do this in the beginning. In the beginning years, we did not have 9 products in parallel. But now, because our audience is so huge, we have to have a mobile app. We have to have quizzes. We have to work with publishers. We have, at any given point, we have at least 12 development projects working in parallel. But we can do this on year 6, not in year 1. And so back to other advices, right? Fleshing your idea, fleshing your users, doing these things to build a robust company that's like Uber or it's like some other place. To get to this place where you have multiple platforms running, you really need to understand, okay, do we have users? When you're talking millions of users, you have to start to branch out, both to feed the machine, to get more of the users in, but then also to appeal to as many people as possible. And to do that, you have to have the development bandwidth, you have to have the budget, you have to know the tone, you have to know the user acquisition, you have to know what you're doing. For the mobile app, we're attracting a different user than what we have on the web. For the web, we're making sure publishers are happy and that we're giving partnerships and that we're offering these other things. Having a good idea is the best thing you could do. And the good idea part is very, very hard. So it really can't be an idea that only you like. You have to find as many people that like it as possible. One of the things that I recommend for this good idea is if you do an unbounce or a splash page, and you can test how to do that. I wrote a book on software development agreements. You can buy it on Amazon, but I'm not going to plug it. But one of the reasons that we did it is we actually created landing pages to test if people would buy it. I didn't want to spend 6 months and $100,000 to write a book that like 5 people would write, right? Or read, I should say. It goes through this whole process. So we made sure we created landing pages and we A/B tested the wording of the title, the message we were giving, and to figure out, would people buy this? And the answer was yes. We had 100 signups in about a week, and people were willing to pay at that time $49 a book, US. So $49 is a lot of money for a book. So it told us that people wanted the book. And this is all before I even wrote it. And what I did with that is I actually printed the sheet of user data and sold it to a publisher and said, I want to write a book. This is the book I think I should write. And they said, why? And I said, well, 100 people just paid me $49 and I haven't written one page. Maybe we should write the book, right? So you really flesh through your idea, and you can do these in lean and cheap ways, especially, the one disadvantage to Europe is I think the cost of business is higher, especially if you're not working. So if you do this in a lean way, you can do what you think is best and find a great idea. Validate the product. So then you're like, okay, we knew people wanted the book. We knew we had users signed up. What's in the book? What do people want? And that's where we talk to the users themselves and ask them, what are your questions? Why did you buy this book? What are you interested in? Why do you want to read this book? We were able to validate that idea, again, before I'd written one page. But we could use that back to the publishing company and say, this is how we need to market it, because we know X, Y, and Z is our user. We know that it's more, in my case, it was more male than female. And we knew that it was more between the ages of 25 and 32 than 32 and above. Then we had a plan. We put together the timeline, the plan, how we would write it, who would help, then we could launch it. So with that plan, we now had everything. Again, have I written a page to this book yet? No. Still hadn't written the book. But we had people paying, we knew people wanted it, we knew which chapters to write about, we knew how to execute it, and we had a timeline. And we knew at certain dates how many people would buy it. If they didn't buy it at that date, then we wouldn't print it at more dates. My book, over 1,000 copies of my book were actually printed in Romania. And we came up with this number not out of nowhere. We actually polled, how many here know GitHub? No, we only had a couple developers. Yikes, okay. So with GitHub, it's a repository for people who code and program. We actually polled the GitHub user database to figure out how many Romanians were programming on GitHub. And the number came back at 3,000. So we knew that 3,000 developers, Romanian developers, were around. We knew there was 200,000 developers in Romania. Well, 100,000 in Romania, 100,000 outside of Romania. And we knew that they wanted this book, and we knew the topics. Again, hadn't written one page, but we're still fleshing this out. Then, back to being more European, in the case of the book, we wanted to make it global. I didn't want to write a Romanian version, an Italian version, and then a German version, and all these other versions. Versions cost money. Versions take cost. You have to figure out the taxes and the laws and all these things. So we knew if we made the book in a generic way that could appeal to these people, we knew that we had at least 3,000 Romanians that wanted this book, of at least 300,000 developer Romanians that wanted the book. So we printed 1,000 copies. I believe 300 are in Bucharest and 700 copies are in Cluj. So we were able to really hone that down. And something to remember is this is a book. This is the oldest method of making money. It's like selling cookies, right? It's tangible, it's a product, it's unsexy, it doesn't scale. But we just knew with the math and the validation of the product, how we would roll this out. This methodology can be applied to anything you do. So it's not just a book. It could be your mobile app. It could be this, it could be that. But it boils down to having the passion and the energy. And we weren't trying to be the Uber for books. Bookster, I guess, is, and maybe that's why I'm at Bookster now. But we really wanted both the expertise and the energy and to roll it out. Okay, so back to boring makes money. Money is so important. If you're fleshing out these ideas and you're trying to figure out what to do, you really want to make sure that people are into it. Otherwise, what are you doing it for, right? One of my measures or tests that I use is I try to say, how many humans can use this product? Not female, not male, not for the women of this or the male of that. If you're stuck to one gender, the market is already too small for me. I want to make sure that as many people, gender, ages as possible, can use this idea. And these are all things that you can do before one line of code or one page of a book is written. So my advice is kind of take that pencil and paper, really hone in and figure that out. So again, really make money, right? Really understand what it is that you can do to get people excited, to get them into your idea. You can collect this data before anyone's downloaded anything. You can have landing pages, you can have slides, you can do all these really amazing things. I hope that I'm inspiring some of you. I see some faces, you're like, yeah, that's cool. It sounds like a lot of work. You know what's a lot of work? Coding for 6 months straight just to find out only 2 people want your mobile app. That's a lot of work. So today I want to inspire you. Figure out what people want. Figure out if you can make money and really be inspired to do what you need to do next.